So, something that I've always thought, or I guess my quest in life, which is, I feel though everyone's quest is to find good, is to find happiness. I feel like at the end of the day, everyone just wants to be happy and everyone wants to be blissful. And so to do these things, we must, to figure out how to get there, how to obtain happiness in its maximum form, and how to preserve it and experience it in as many avenues as we can. And so for me, I guess trying to figure out that good, one is understanding what is that good, but I feel like that understanding of good is somewhat natural to us, and our understanding of good is naturally within us. So I know that murder is bad, and I know by knowing the opposite or a contrary fact to what good is, I, in a sense, understand what good is and understand what happiness is. I know that when I do a good job on something or like get a good grade, I feel a sense of happiness, which is a feeling associated with good. And so goodness, I feel like, is easily identifiable. It's easily identifiable because it's an experience for a lot of people, and it's just like a common note. But I guess what I really want to focus on then is the opposite of that, because if happiness and blissfulness is what I desire, and where I want to be, and I know that it is good, what are the times in which I'm not feeling that, in which I am not obtaining good, I'm not doing good? And so that makes me think of, I guess, like the Buddhist philosophy on this of suffering. When I am not happy, when I am not obtaining the good, there's a sense of suffering. And not suffering, like, I guess suffering is a very extreme term, I feel like, for a lot of people. And so I think used a little loosely in Buddhist philosophy. So when we speak of suffering, their suffering is very broad. And so I'm suffering simply because I am a human and I am a finite being, and at some point I will die. That is suffering, So and there's different layers to suffering and what that is, but it's, I guess, identifying suffering. Identifying suffering is the real key for me to remain blissful, to remain in this Zen, like, goodness. And so when I identify my suffering, I'm able to grasp that the good, and how to turn my suffering into blissfulness and not find the pain. Because I think that's what we all want, don't we? We just don't want to suffer. We just, whether our like magnitude of goodness is high or low, it's still good. And suffering is necessary for us to appreciate the good. And so to know good, we have to know suffering. And to know something, I feel like, is to experience it and to be aware of it. And so I can throw terms at you, and I can try to relate my own experiences of suffering, but ultimately, to know one's suffering is to know oneself, or their own personal experiences of suffering. And so let me just quickly explain some identifying factors of suffering. And so I'm going to, because this is very strongly related to Buddhist philosophy, I'm going to continue riding that route for right now. So Buddhism, they can observe suffering in 3 different forms. There's suffering of pain. This is like immediate sensation of pain. You stub your toe, or you get sad, you're angry, like any volitions associated. These are like immediate sensations of suffering. They're very present, they're very aware. Then there's suffering of impermanence. So realizing that things are not always going to be here. And so attachment to impermanence is suffering. And so if you have an attachment to your car, there is like an ingrained suffering in there, because when you do not have your car anymore, all the joy and like the blissfulness and everything that you love about your car is gone. There's suffering, and you're just like, damn, I don't have a car anymore. Like, that sucks. Like, all the joy that it brought me is no longer there. Or maybe something like a video game console, like a PlayStation. If my PlayStation were to break, it would probably upset me, I'd be like, man, I had a lot of joy. So this is kind of like the suffering associated with impermanence. And then there's the suffering of conditions. And so back to like what I was talking about before, we are finite beings, and because we are finite beings, we are going to die, and therefore, that's suffering. Or my eyesight is good today, but I know as I get older, it's going to deteriorate. That is suffering. I'm healthy today, not healthy tomorrow. These are conditions in which we cannot help. So, and there's suffering there. So this is kind of like the groundwork for what suffering is, and in knowing kind of where the suffering exists and the different forms in which it can take shape, we are able to understand the pain and the suffering. And essentially that is the first noble truth. And it's just identifying suffering. There is suffering. I feel like that's pretty easy, basic term for people to understand. And then the second truth is there are causes to suffering. The third truth is that there is an end to suffering. And the fourth truth is just, okay, these are the things you got to do to not suffer. This is the path to not suffer. And because suffering is a remedial condition, how do we maximize that? How do we continue to remediate the causes of suffering? And the big thing for me is, or the biggest term would be ignorance. And ignorance is the remedial condition to end suffering. And so it's being ignorant of suffering. It's being ignorant of impermanence. And I don't want to get into this one now, but in ignorance of the self and the non-self. But that's a whole different discussion, which is not needed for quite this moment. But so just being aware of our suffering and being aware of the impermanence in just suffering in general, it helps us to, not suffer. And so when you are feeling anxious, or you're feeling like sad and depressed, and you want to touch in on that suffering. Why am I feeling sad and depressed? Or what are the causes to this? And where are my attachments right now? And what are my feelings towards this right now? And slowly going through and like honing in on what our suffering is, what it is, and in knowing what it is, we are taking one step closer to ending that, seizing that suffering. And so I guess for now, I just want to be conscious of where we suffer and know that, I know it's like, I know when I do these like deep meditations on suffering, and it starts to freak me the fuck out. And I'm just like, holy shit, I am suffering so much in this aspect, and this aspect, and here, and you know, you can just spiral so quick. Ooh, let's take a chill pill. Know that, again, suffering exists. This is just there. It exists. But because suffering exists, good exists. And blissfulness exists. And we know that suffering is a remedial condition. We know that we do not always need to suffer. And proof of this is because we have experienced moments of joy, moments of bliss. And to whatever magnitude that is, know that that is not suffering. You were not suffering in that moment. And so we know that we can escape. We can escape this suffering. And so it's being conscious of our moments of suffering, but also our moments of joy, our moments of bliss, and seeing what truly made us blissful in that moment. Was it playing video games? Was I, happy in playing those games? Was it the experience? Was it the thrill, the, trying to figure something out, the more like logical aspect of it, and really getting deep into our moments of blissfulness and our joy, and finding that love and compassion. I think the love in the blissfulness really, really, really grounds me in a lot of these things. And so enjoy the things in which you enjoy. Like truly, truly enjoy them. Do not be upset when they're not there anymore, because, we can't hold that attachment. Otherwise we suffer. So if we hold that attachment to this particular joy, then, like if I hold the desire to, when I play video games, I'm always going to be happy. No, the game Dark Souls exists. I'm not going to be happy every time I play Dark Souls. It's just that's not a reality. But there's joy, and there's joys associated with it. And so being aware of our joy, being aware of our suffering, these are all great steps into, maintaining and maximizing our blissfulness and just being mindful creatures.